Rebecca asked me to come and talk to you guys at Max's suggestion, so thank you guys very much for having me here. I was super excited to be invited to come speak. I only started speaking this past summer, so any chance that I get to come and talk to people, I feel like is really good practice. But then I got really nervous about it. All of these thoughts started flying at me. Who am I to talk about Node? I've used Node for a few little pet projects, but I'm not a real Node developer. What do I have to even talk about, especially to a room full of people who already know it really well? So this is kind of a meta talk on the fears that I had centered around that I'm not qualified to give a talk. I really just wanted to run away at that point. Sorry? I won't be running away. For semantics sake, when I'm talking about a Node developer, I'm kind of talking about a developer who's using Node to build cool things, or anything really, in the same way that a JavaScript developer uses JavaScript and might not actually be developing the language. When I think of real Node, it's all of these projects that spring to mind. These cornerstone, impactful projects that are under active development, and they have a lot of attention and contributors. And while I've used many of these tools, I don't actually produce stuff like this, I just consume them. So I was trying to think of what I could be talking about to you guys, and I thought about what I do at Craigslist. I'm a front-end engineer there. I started in July. Craigslist somewhat notably uses almost mostly Perl for its backend. So you might be surprised to hear that Craigslist does in fact use Node as part of its stack. We maintain an open source called Haraka, which is a flexible, performant SMTP server. And as much as I'd love to talk more about it, I don't really deal with that tool. Haven't had a chance to really explore it yet. My coworkers and I are exploring opportunities where Node might be useful in our work, especially on the front end. Sorry, is this cutting in and out for you guys? But things haven't quite taken off yet. We have big plans, though. Additionally, my own side projects kind of fell by the wayside while I was adjusting to the new job. This is a selfie of me learning Perl. It just feels like it's been a while since I've done anything seriously nodey. And it took me all of that thinking to realize that this is pretty much classic imposter syndrome. I think that the phrase has been especially more, it's come into common parlance in the past few years, but psychologists have been studying it since the 70s. I really liked Geek Feminism Wiki's definition the best out of all the resources that I looked at. Imposter syndrome describes a situation where someone feels like an imposter or a fraud because they think that their accomplishments are nowhere near as good as those of the people around them. So you see, I've already gone through the trouble of comparing myself to a bunch of other amazing projects and obviously coming up short. So does this mean that myself and anyone else who doesn't contribute to these projects doesn't actually know Node? In an article on imposter syndrome for Forbes, a professional coach named Evelyn Kalinowski gave some strategies to counter imposter syndrome. Two that I found the most useful were mindfulness, that you recognize imposter feelings when they come up, and then also reframing, that you rewrite your mental script around the feelings that you recognize. So once I realized that I was spending so much time trying to measure up to these imaginary requirements and making all of those excuses, I finally had my moment of mindfulness, and I thought, well, hey, wait a second. What even makes anyone a real Node developer? At what point do we get to attach a label to ourselves? What does it mean to be a Node developer or any other language, Django, Drupal, any other framework out there? I tried to think of all the scout badges you'd have to earn to become an Eagle Node developer. Is it is it contributing to core itself? Is it being able to write an HTTP server off the cuff without looking at the docs? Maybe it's just completing the Node School modules, which are super fun. Maybe it's only setting up automated builds and tests for your code as it is. Maybe all you have to do is go to NodeConf and have a really good time. Or maybe it's just contributing to your friends' Node projects. Is it just one or all of these things put together? You might guess that I'm going to say that it's some or all of these things and more. Node has a lot to offer beyond contributing to core or writing the next big MVC framework. Getting started or involved with any of these things should empower anyone to feel like a real Node developer, which means that you become part of one of the smartest, most welcoming, and most inclusive groups of people that I know of. This is actual recorded video of me writing JavaScript. When I really considered it, I realized that I've learned so much from doing even just basic Node development, which I've taken into my professional life as a programmer, including the tools that I use, the way I organize my code, and my interactions with the broader community. So one of the things that I use Node for in almost every project that I touch is to run tools. Grunt or Gulp and Takana are two of my go-tos. I tend to use Gulp personally, and we use Grunt at Craigslist. Either way, they automate the build steps, they make compiling Sass and less easy, running linters, concatenating and minifying front-end assets makes it all painless. Takana is a cool project that will show edits you make to Sass in real time in your browser as you're editing in your code editor of choice. And that's super cool. And using Node to set those tools up was really painless. Learning Node also led me to getting comfortable with the idea of package management, which was possible through NPM. And once I got how that worked, it made the idea of Bower seem pretty great, something to automatically download, organize, and version my front end for me. No more piecemeal collecting and downloading random files all over the internet. The manager did it. I was also experimenting with require.js, which is a modular script loader for the front end. It's a little persnickety to set up, but I liked the philosophy of modularizing my code and loading files only as I needed them. And then shortly thereafter, I learned about browserify, and that kind of changed everything and replaced both Bower and require.js in my toolset. Learning how to write modular JavaScript has probably been one of the biggest lessons I've taken from Node. Browserify is a system of dependency injection for JavaScript that works sanely. You can require in dependencies and declare them into your files as you need them. And this impacted not only how I set up my projects, but affected all the way down to how I actually write and refactor JavaScript. It made me realize that front-end code base didn't have to be a couple files of multi-thousand lines of jQuery spaghetti, that they could actually have conventions and be parceled out and readable and maintainable in a way that I'd never really seen done in a front-end code base before. So now when I approach a new project or I'm refactoring existing code, I'm always thinking about how to introduce these conventions because I'm very convinced that it leads to a cleaner, more maintainable code base. And these are ideas that inform me both as a hobbyist and as a professional programmer. Node also taught me how to open source, basically. I contributed to my friends' Node projects, and it taught me the dynamics of contributing, how to accept criticism gracefully, how to give feedback diplomatically, the overall idea of how to contribute and be a good citizen in open source land, and how to add emoji to my GitHub commits. And finally, Node taught me how to do community right. This is a picture that I took at a workshopper event at NodeConf, which I attended this past summer for the first time. And it was actually the first conference that I had traveled out of wherever I lived for. And it was a great experience. The Node community has always somehow managed to make me feel personally invited to participate in the community. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I think part of it is that I've never had to prove my Node credentials to anyone. I'm just welcomed in just by virtue of knowing how to npm install anything. It's been observing these efforts for inclusivity in events, projects, and conferences, whether through outreach, more diverse panels and speakers, or just a code of conduct in a GitHub repository that sets the tenor of welcomeness throughout the whole culture. Thinking about the ways that Node has influenced me really helped me realize that I'm much more capable with Node than I initially thought. Reframing my identity around those broader ideas of what I'd learned in using Node definitely helped me feel more confident in the skills that I have, and to remember how varied and diverse experiences can be for people that are using Node for all the different ways that they need to use it, and that they're all legitimate. I think it's important to remember that Node is for people who only use it to compile CSS and they never go to a conference, as much as it is for the people who maintain core. It's for the consumers as much as the producers. And if you use Node, you probably are a real Node developer too. When it comes to Node development, I think there's no timeline, there's no actual scout badges, although that could be a fun idea, and no requirements. You can use Node in the way that suits you and your purposes, and you can feel real. And whatever you create is a real thing that matters. And that's ultimately why I decided that I could, in fact, come here and talk to you all about it. I don't really have an answer on how to help people feel move from feeling like Node novices to Node adepts yet, but I do know that whatever level we're at, we can say that we're a part of this community, and I'm going to keep on learning and creating, and I really hope all of you do too. So thank you.